I don't know about you, but I'm a little excited because I see some people from high school I haven't seen in like 4 years. That's crazy. So I'm a little excited. It feels like home to me. This is like my 5th time or so being here. And before I always go, I just really have to thank this church. I always have to do that. Whenever you guys continue to have this and you guys keep wanting to have me here, I'm always going to be here. So I thank you guys so much for it. The poem I'm going to do for you, Abolition of Competition, I actually did this poem. I was blessed with the opportunity to first share it at True Voice in Chicago. And basically, it's an amazing event just with a lot of Christian poets around the area. Shout out to Miss Kia. She was one of the amazing poets there. And I was just so blessed with the opportunity just to share this poem. And little did I know, it eventually became really one of my favorite pieces, just for the message in and of itself. So, I'll share it with you guys. Hope you guys like it. Hope you guys enjoy it, and blesses you guys. So thank you. You know what's amazing? How sororities and frats who only share the same Greek text on their backs collectively possess our harmonious union that we who live by an ancient Greek text lacks. Yes. It's amazing how teams who are only brought together by money and contracts can jointly interact to inspire millions and bring fame to the name only by winning a game, but yet we who serve the one whose name is above every name collectively can't even do the same. Yes, it's amazing how we claim to have the same father, but one dichotomous issue has pushed our family away even farther. See, it's sad to say that we as Christians have hindered our own mission because we continue to be separated by comparison, jealousy, and competition. See, the goal to build the kingdom was once imperative, but it's become blindsided because our mindset has become comparative. As believers, we are working towards the same goal, but jealousy starts to take control. Comparing yourself to others begins to take toll. Advancing his kingdom once made us whole, but we made it about us, so now it's left us with holes. Competition only mirrors our selfish ambition. And if we aren't careful, it can cause an incision in our mission, so we never carry out the Great Commission, because maybe if we make other disciples, they might just exceed our position. Ironically, the enemy loves when we are in competition because we end up being on his team when he's actually supposed to be our opposition. So we get jealous because our ministry in life is not as glamorous as our friends on Instagram. Maybe because we think that ministry equals instant fans. So we become so focused on others that our relationship with God has become so distant. Man, it's crazy. How comparing and competition says I can't congratulate your achievements. So I express my discontent in order to oppress and suppress your success. And I never hope you progress in anything you do. I'm not impressed, and I neglect the fact that you may have been blessed. So I take on this unnecessary contest because outdoing you has become my main conquest. But listen, we forget that if God must increase, then we must become less. Right. Yes, if we are really serious about growth, then ultimately we must learn to confess. See, competition had Cain disabling Abel. Had Jacob deceiving Esau, had David running from King Saul, had Joseph sold by his brothers, which then put tribes against one another. Had David running from King Saul, had Joseph sold by his brothers, which then put tribes against one another. Had people decided between Apollos or Apostle Paul, has us thinking that we're the only ones who have been called, but we better watch out because our pride comes right before our fall. And remember, as the saying goes, the bigger we are, the harder we fall. But I know it all too well. Outwardly just painting the scene so that I can be seen instead of projecting Christ, who should be seen in me. Listen, the key to unity is understanding the functioning role of community. For there are many parts but one body, many leaves but one tree, many chapters but one book. But when I think of community over competition, I think of Jonathan, who was the heir apparent to his father's throne, but he is more recognized by his friendship alone. He probably waited his whole life to be the next commander-in-chief, but yet God chose David, who started out as a keeper of sheep. See that it was no lust for power, jealousy, or competition, because his overall mission was bigger than his possible position. See, the kingdom was more important than being a king. Or what about those believers in Acts chapter 4, verse 32 through 35, who too understood that their unity was their key to survive, and who were all united in their hearts and their minds, not just because they thought it was nice to be kind to man, but because they knew what Christ could do for mankind? Or what about John chapter 17, verse 23, when our Savior says that they will be unified and together as we are, I and them and you and me, and together they will give this godless world evidence that you have sent me and loved them in the same way that you have loved me. See, Christ is saying that when his body is unified, non-believers will see that God really sent him as sacrificial love, because our unity would represent the relationship with the Father above. So brothers and sisters, we have to end the spirit of competition, for it displays our true heart condition. So we need a great physician, a divine clinician, one that can help us die to a flesh, a divine mortician. So maybe we focus on Christ's vision, because together we can bring an abolition of competition. Thank you, guys. This poem is kind of personal for me. It really is. Talking about shoes. Well, this is kind of my shoes, my testimony. But really, how spoken word is really from God, and I really can't take credit for it for myself. I'm reminded of a quote that the youth pastor at my church, he says a lot, that sometimes God has a qualified purpose for an unqualified person. Yeah, God has a qualified purpose for an unqualified person. And basically what that means is, despite what we can see, despite what we look at people and we can kind of make assumptions about them, despite their past, despite anything that they may have done, God might have a specific purpose for them, even though we can't see it, even though it's beyond our eyes. They're seen in the eyes of God. And the poem entitled "Consider Me" kind of really talks about that. So I'm just going to go right into it. Again, thank you guys again, and I hope it blesses you guys. I find it ironic how we tend to write people off while God is the one writing their stories. Ironic how our finite minds unknowingly undermine the work of the author and finisher of our faith, who illustrated the beauty in this place we live in called Earth. How man was intricately formed from the dust and the dirt. The fact that he finished our stories before birth. And the God who blotted out our transgressions. It's interesting how we put his stories and ultimately his glory into question. And just when we thought we could predict their outcome, God displayed an unexpected twist to show us that we were wrong about what we thought was weak and useless, because in his script he actually uses what we think is weak to deem us as foolish. See, consider me, age 3. Stood out like a black sheep, a little boy who had issues with his speech. It was seemingly predestined that it would be hard for me to speak, as I would endure my classmates and their hurtful critiques, because they failed to understand that God just made me unique. See, I had doctors and dentists telling me that I would be tongue-tied, and without surgery, my tongue would stay tied. But before I had any knowledge of spoken word, I had parents who spoke his word. Instead of panicking, they prayed and reminded themselves and I that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and reassured me that God was the potter and I was the clay. play. So by God's grace, the physical limitations to my voice have gone astray. But the effect that it had on me mentally remained. See, I actually grew up hating the sound of my own voice. So I began to be quiet by choice because I was afraid of people listening to what I perceived to be hindering. But fast forward to high school, when for the first time I was told that my voice was bold by a speech class teacher. And also for the first time when I realized that because of Christ, I was made a new creature. See, my identity wasn't found in my insecurity, but found in the one who bore my iniquity. A man who possessed no beauty that we should desire him, no majesty to his frame, a man who took on our shame, a man who took on our pain, even though we like sheep have gone astray, by oppression and judgment he was taken away, so that one day we may recognize him as the light, the truth, and the way, a man rejected and despised, but yet he took on our punishment when he hung on the cross and died. I also remember being introduced to Exodus chapter 4, verse 10 through 11 for the first time. Moses, who stood in the presence of the Almighty God, the self-proclaimed I am that I am, and asked him, who am I? For my speech is not eloquent and I've always been tongue-tied. But God replied back and said, Moses, put your insecurity to the side because I will be right by your side. For who gives someone the ability to speak? Is it not I? I will protect you, so I want you to be my mouthpiece because I have already given you the ability to speak. From that day forward, I realized that the very thing that I hated was essentially the very thing that God created. Listen, the very thing that you think you lack could also be the very thing that God uses for impact. Listen, God already finished your story while others are still trying to guess your ending. And even though the thoughts towards you were insensitive and condescending, there is a God in heaven ascending that is tender to your heart that he's mending. Because that instrument he will use to give harmony to this world, it's you that he's sending. So to that boy who was once told by his teachers that he would be a troublemaker because they forgot that their words have power, remember that caterpillars will one day turn into butterflies. And one day you will flutter by like those eagles and soar, because despite what they saw in you, God actually had more in store. See, what others may have ignored, God will soon restore. And for those who are put in a box, remember that that box that they tried to put you in is just your treasure chest, containing God's riches and his manifest bless, treasures you already possess while others said you were next. And for those who may have written off someone as hopeless, remember that we were all once black sheep, graciously made white because we were washed in the blood of the Lamb. We are all God's masterpiece, and because of Christ, we can now do the good things that God has planned. So on this Saturday night, I stand before you boldly saying, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Because you never know when you might just use your voice.